So I got this nightstand for $5 on OfferUp and decided to give it a little makeover, starting with sanding. I'll be using my electric mouse sander by Black & Decker and 80 grit sandpaper to go with it. Make sure to have several sheets on hand so that you can switch them out during the project. Sanding the flat surfaces was pretty easy, but make sure to hug right along the edges. The areas with more details was definitely the hardest part, so here's a little up close of how I did the legs. So I'd recommend putting on a new sheet of sandpaper onto the sander before working on the more detailed areas so that you're not finding yourself going over the same area several times. You would start by working on the easiest areas first, and then hugging right along the edges and working your way out from the edge. So here it is, all finished, and now I'm ready to get started on using my little paint technique. So I have pieces like this around my home and I've always loved the look of it. So I definitely plan on using whitewash where the wood areas are, but then a thicker white paint substance for where the grooves and detailed areas are. First, I'll get started using gesso to create the thick white paint look. Gesso is pretty much just a thick white paste that I'll be applying using my fingers. Honestly, this is going to get pretty messy on your hands, but the messier the look, the better it's going to look in the end. So I'm making sure to apply a thick layer of gesso mainly along the edges and any detailed areas. For the legs of the nightstand, the grooves were pretty deep, so I made sure to get plenty of gesso in there in order to make sure I was going to cover any of the dark areas that were showing. Any of the extra gesso that was on my fingers, I used on the more open flat areas and just smeared it to where it was almost completely gone. So I went ahead and continued this technique on the rest of the nightstand and even the tabletop as well. Just slap it on and rub it off. So this is what it looks like once I'm all done with the gesso. But as you can see, the hard lines along the edges is something that I want to be a little bit more blended. So I'll be using the electric sander in order to sand a lot of those areas down. So this is what it looks like after the sanding, and you can see the edges are a lot more worn down. And so now I'm ready to start with the watered down paint. So to create the mixture, I mixed a 1/4 cup of water with 2 tablespoons of Rust-Oleum white chalk paint, and then just use a brush to apply it on the entire nightstand. Once I covered one side of the nightstand completely in the mixture, I then grabbed a wet rag to start blending in the paint and even taking some of it off as I go. This is what it looks like after I'm done using the wet rag, and it still looks a little bit too white for me, so I'm going to be using this block of sander that I got from the dollar store to just finish up taking off some of the white paint and roughing up some of the detailed areas. Then you can use a sealer to lock it all into place and put the hardware back onto the drawers, and you are finished.